What's up everybody, Brandon Johnson here again, and Happy New Year. I'm kicking off the channel this year with a brand new series featuring my dad, Rick Johnson. Now, I grew up in a musical household, and my dad was a professional musician for most of his career, playing in various different, kind of funk and rock bands. So I was lucky enough to really grow up around live music and professional musicians. And in this series, I wanted to kind of delve into some of the experiences and some of the things that my dad has learned throughout his musical career, all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s and beyond. And today my dad's going to talk about his experiences playing with Little Richard in the 1970s, and it's just a really, really great story with a lot of kind of interesting anecdotes about the things that Little Richard told him about how to play his songs, and some of the things my dad learned kind of playing with Little Richard and the experiences that he had with him in a live situation. We'll also look at a riff, an actual specific lick that my dad learned playing with Little Richard as well, that he's going to share with you guys. So I hope you enjoy this one. Let's check it out.
Yeah, I think it was in about 1971, I hooked up with a guy in Denver named Dewey Terry, who is a songwriter, frontman, keyboard player, blues and R&B, great guy, very talented. He had a current album out on Tumbleweed Records, and his old partner and childhood friend was Don Sugarcane Harris. And in the 50s, they had an act together. They must have been quite young in the 50s, and they wrote several songs. They had it wasn't they didn't have really any hit records. They recorded them, but other people ended up doing their songs. One of them was "I'm Leaving It Up to You," and other songs, Farmer John, Justine, like I say, usually ended up being recorded by other artists. So we were putting together this band. We weren't doing their 50s songs in early 70s. We were doing their current blues and R&B things that they had just had out on recent records or hope to put out soon on a record. So Dewey, we'd rehearse in getting ready in Denver, and Dewey would tell us these stories about the 50s and the different, all the experiences they had in the 50s, and the music business, and how they, how they would record, and the different dynamics of the music business. And Dewey was a great storyteller, and so one day he told us this story. He said, well, we toured with Little Richard, and he said it was, I guess it was in the late 50s or 60s, as I remember the story, and Dewey, so Dewey said, we toured with Little Richard, and we went to Europe. So they had the American Rock and Roll Review, and different artists, and Don and Dewey were one of them, and they had other artists. And then at the end, it was Little Richard, the king of rock and roll, and it was the finale. And all the other groups would get together at the end and back up Little Richard. And so he said we had 4 guitar players, all playing that same lick, all together. And so he goes, all 4 of us are playing the same line. And he goes, and the 4 guitar players were myself and Don, so Don and Dewey, and Harvey Mandel. And he goes, and then he paused, and he goes, and we're all sitting there, and he goes, and the 4th guitar player was Jimi Hendrix. And we go, Dewey, Jimi Hendrix, you played with Jimi Hendrix? Are you kidding me? We're about 21 at the time, and so he said, yeah. And we go, well, what was it like? What was it like playing with Jimi Hendrix? And Dewey goes, as I recall, Jimi was really good, of course, but wouldn't stay on the part. He'd be all over the place. He'd be going, and he'd be going crazy stuff. And said Richard didn't like it. Richard, he didn't play the part like Richard wanted. So soon after that, just a month or two after, back in about 1971, we go out to Los Angeles with Don and Dewey, Don Sugar Cane Harris, Dewey Terry. We had a darn good band, a lot of guys from Minneapolis. Stan Kipper was on drums, 2 horn players, bass player, and we were good. And so the minute we got there, Dewey calls up Little Richard. And you know, that's one of the first lessons I learned is that, you know, always promote your band. These guys promoted themselves constantly. They're always seeing how they could get ahead, getting the next gig, you know. And I was sitting right there. I was this close to Dewey. So Dewey calls up on the phone, and Little Richard Penniman is his name. And so Dewey's a great flamboyant guy, you know. He calls up on the phone, very serious. Mr. Penniman, please. And then all of a sudden I hear him go, hey, Dewey, hey, Richard, what's happening? You know, they're going at it. Well, you know, one thing I want to say is that I researched the story, and I think it's true, more or less. I'm not sure about Harvey Mandel. I can't place him with them. But Richard did definitely tour Europe. The Beatles actually warmed up for Little Richard in 1962, I found. And Hendrix did play with Little Richard. And they fired him, actually, because he didn't wear the right outfit. He was always late for the bus, Hendrix, and that sort of thing. So anyway, we're in LA, and we call up Richard. We go over to his motel. We talked to him a couple times. Richard was very flamboyant, always entertaining. Everywhere he went, he was entertaining. He was a star, you know. And I was 21. I was, you know, at that time, 71. I was thinking, well, you know, the Cream and Hendrix, those guys, you know, those more hippie rock bands, that's the cool thing. In the 50s, or maybe a little passe, that was old, and, you know. And I learned that he really is the king of rock and roll. He really started a lot of things. And they say that Paul McCartney's woo is from Little Richard. It's generally acknowledged. I mean, it's no secret. So Richard goes, well, I'm playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. I want you guys to come over there and play. So great, you know, so 2 nights. So we go over there, and I looked it up. I think it was in October of 71. We were there with Richard at the Whiskey A Go-Go. So we go there, and Richard just took command of everything. He takes a chair, puts it in the dance floor, and he goes, everybody get up there. Dewey, you get your band up there. Get up there. And another thing I learned is that they didn't just do a sound check. They did like a rehearsal. They were always thinking about the show, making everything right, make the sound right, make sure the instruments were right, the setup was good. They were very professional, you know, and they just didn't get up on stage and play a song list. They entertained, and they had a show. So we get up there on stage at the sound check, and Richard's on the chair in the dance floor. He goes, oh, you guys are great. Yeah, I want you all up there with me. I want you all up there with me. Well, oh, okay. So Richard gets up there in the sound check on the piano, and he goes, no, I cannot play this piano. I can't play this piano. I can't play this piano. And oh, Richard, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? No, I can't play this piano. So they take away the piano, they call up studio rentals, and takes 2 hours. We're sitting around for 2 hours. Finally, this truck comes with this grand piano. They roll it in, all of us, everybody, both bands, the roadies, anybody had to lift this grand piano up on the Whiskey A Go-Go stage, which is pretty high. And so Richard played. So we're all up there, both bands, 2 drummers, 2 bass players. I think Richard had maybe 1 guitar player, maybe another 2, and myself, horns. There's no room to stand. Richard played, you know, the 50s guys that always play sideways. His piano was sideways to the crowd, so you could see him playing. And I was right at the right side of the piano, and it was so tight that I was touching the piano, and the drums were right behind me, so I'm just standing like this. So we played our whole show, and then they go, and then they call it the vamp, you know. We start going. And they go fast, you know.
Yeah.
And they go, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, you know, the king of rock and roll, Little Richard. And then, you know, we're vamping this thing over and over, the same lick. I'm 21, I'm playing this with the king of rock and roll. And it was fast, and it wasn't easy. My hand starts cramping. I'm going, and I'm looking around, I better not screw up, you know. And Richard comes, and Richard comes out, you know, hey, and everybody's clapping, and Little Richard, the king of rock and roll, and everything, you know. But I was standing there with, literally could feel Richard's piano, and I've played with a few, more than a few, original 50s guys, and he's one of the best. I mean, you can tell how good a musician is right away. When he started playing, he was pounding the piano. He's just pounding it. And then when he starts to sing, it's like this loud, big gospel voice. The guy is good. So it's a key of C. Then I've heard it that way too. It's really a bass lick.